Okay, welcome back to the Winning Balance podcast. Today, I am joined with one of my favorite people in the entire world, one of my good buddies, Lame Kinikini. Freaking stud right here.
What's up, brother?
Freaking Lame, dude. Okay, so the background on Lame, I'll dive into his bio here in a second too, but when I moved from Seattle to Utah, I knew absolutely no one.
The lone duck.
I was literally like, how am I going to start over? How am I going to figure this out? And so I just started going on Facebook pages, figuring out who the real players were and doing my studying of who do I need to talk to? Who should I talk to? And Lame, you were one of the first people that I knew as a player here in Utah in the real estate space. And you were kind enough to freaking get some lunch with me. Where was it at? Strap Tank?
Yeah, Strap Tank. Dude, and it's so funny. I look back on that now and I don't even know, because I don't usually take lunches, bro. And so I can't remember what you said, but obviously, I went, and I always go if I feel like, there's a reason to go, or or somebody's a real stud. And so it's compliments to you, bro. Like,
I appreciate it.
It happened, dog. So.
Now that lunch was monumental for like my Utah journey, 100%.
Yeah.
And it was funny enough too, because that was like our first real conversation, but the amount of conversations after that is like, all right, Lame, is this guy a player? Like, should I talk to this guy? Like,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All the time after. So that's where we got started. Real quick, guys, Lame's bio. Listen to this. Lame is in the short-term space. He is single-handedly runs the Utah market for short-term rentals. Like single-handedly, there's not a close second that I'd even argue. He owns 200 rentals himself, 200 plus rentals. He stopped keeping count. And he has 50 million under management for his short-term rental space, which is absolutely wild. So if you guys have watched the podcast at The Winning Balance, what I really love to do is hear people's perspective on their journey, your career. Those are some massive numbers, Lame. And I obviously know you and know the kind of person you are. But what I'd love to hear is how this journey carried out from the very beginning and how your family was ingrained in this, because I know you as a family man. That's why you're sitting here. And family is obviously a massive part of your career and in your journey. And so I'd love for you to tell your career's story while sprucing in your family, since, they were along for the ride, of course, right?
100%. Well, first off, dude, I appreciate you having me, dude. I know we've been talking about it a long time and we finally made it happen. Yeah. So, but I'm just stoked to be here, stoked to share my story. I love what this podcast specifically is about, because I feel like thankfully I've lived a life where I've just been presented a lot of opportunities where I've just been blessed to be able to just say yes to. And a lot of that has come by way of like just being true to like the core principles and foundations of like what I hold really true and sacred to myself, right? Which is first and foremost Heavenly Father, and in that is my family, right? And so those two things, and people, I'm going to get down to like nitty-gritty of family and like what I've learned and all that, but I also like firmly believe that like, deity in whatever religion you associate with is a significant part of like life and business. And there's like parallels of like lessons that you'll learn if you understand at the core like the principles of in my opinion, like what it means to be a Christ-like person. Like, and it's crazy how they like align. They really do. And so, and I only say that because that's, my faith is a integral part of my family, because I come from a family that like really has put that first. We're here. My families are all, I come from a family of immigrants. We're here because of our faith, right? And the American dream looks a lot different to us than it does others because of what we've sacrificed and how close that immigration, like that immigration journey for my grandfather, like it's still really close, It's like I have, grandparents who didn't speak English, that came here on boats to be able to live this life. And so, yeah.
If you don't mind, dude, could you dive more into that story of how they came to America?
100%. So I come from, both my parents are Tongan, full Tongan, and both their parents are from the islands. And so, And they both have very unique stories, right? Like my mother, whose grandfather's Hailame, who's my grandpa that I'm named after, he had issues with his visa, and his story of coming over here was one of like faith and fortune, in terms of like just super fortunate to meet the right people that allowed him to come here. My grandfather on my dad's side, he worked 6-7 years here in America by himself while his family was back on the Rock, to be able to then get his family to come over here eventually, right? And so there's a lot of those stories that really speak volumes to, like, really, again, the American dream. And it means so much more to us than it does to others because of like what it meant to my, grandparents. Because I just think people forget like what it means, like what that sacrifice and that life actually looks like. It's
I don't think about that ever.
Exactly. It's like, imagine going to another country you know nothing about, you have nothing, you don't speak the language, and your family's not with you. It's like being able to do that, like it requires a different type of mindset. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that like my grandparents were the greatest entrepreneurs. They were the purest entrepreneurs, right? And they made that jump just off of faith, right? My great grandfather actually, like, a very cool story is he actually wrote in his personal journal, he wrote in English, even though his first language was Tongan, but he wrote in English. And one of the first things he says in his first, in his first journal entry is I'm writing in English because I have a vision that my posterity will speak English. And that will be the first language at which they speak, right?
That's wild.
And it's like just stuff like that. And it's like, I'm thankful to be a part of a heritage where like little stories like that are sprinkled all over, to where, again, you arrive to where I am today. It's like, I feel like I'm here because of I've been carried on the shoulders of giants, And so, but yeah, I mean, like getting down to the nitty gritty, both my grandparents on either side are from the Rock, are from Tonga. It's part of the Polynesian Triangle. A lot of people don't know that there's different islands. If you're from Utah, a lot of people know there's Samoan, Tongan, Fijian, all that. I'm Tongan. Both my parents are Tongan. Both my grandparents are Tongan. I'm full Tongan. My grandparents on either side were immigrants. My grandpa on my dad's side was a farmer. He farmed in California and then eventually Idaho. That's where I was born, actually, was in Idaho State. So I'm a potato head. Yeah.
What part?
And so Boise.
I love it.
And so my, when I was there, my grandpa had a little farm out in Nampa, and so still owns that house, and so still in the family at least. But then my other grandfather, he came in here and he was a bus driver for a long time. And so, but I look at their stories and I'm often reminded of like, of the really the obligation I hold to make sure that I build on what they built, right? We talk about farmer, we talk about bus drivers. These are humble beginnings, but you have to understand, like, those are mountains and steps above where they came from, right? It's like you look at like where my grandparents are and where I am, and arbitrary number, let's say that distance is 5. Mm-hmm. I really believe them coming from the islands, immigrating, learning the language, everything like that, and then becoming a bus driver and a farmer, I believe that's a 10. I think that what they had to go through was harder than what I had to do today, but because of the opportunity here in America, it just, I've been blessed to be able to do that because of the journey that they had, and I don't forget that. And so, but yeah, that's kind of the ancestry, amazing, bro. And so I go on, I go on and on, dude. But it means a lot to me when it comes to family and really, what we're trying to build here. So
for sure. Well, take us back to, you're from Idaho.
Yep.
When did you move to Utah?
So I was born in Idaho because my dad was going to college there at the time. So he was going to Boise State. Was
he the first generation, like, going to college?
So first generation, but he wasn't the first one to get a college degree. So my dad is the youngest of 6. Uh-huh. And he has a few siblings that all graduated from college. One of my aunts is a nurse.
Your grandfather probably instilled that education into them.
Education was massive. It was massive. And it's ironic because, I'm a dropout, but really, again, when you understand the principles of what is being taught, like, the outcome doesn't always look the same, mm-hmm, but the principle of how you achieve it, like, if you understand that, like, you'll still be fine. Yeah. Right. And for my grandfather, it was like, hey, you just need to be better than we are today. And you need to always remember your roots. Right. And so at the time, education was a big thing. And so my dad is the youngest of 6. He's a licensed physician. So his journey started in Idaho, started bouncing around in different places. He ended up graduating from BYU, where he met my mom. When he graduated, there was my sister, my older sister, me, and my younger brother. There's 3 of us. And he had graduated, and he was a social worker. And he had graduated. Him and my mom were just working social work, just like normal. And then my dad had a late life, really revelation that he felt like he needed to go back to school. And so my dad ended up going back to school, and he ended up going and getting his undergrad in I think he had social work, and then he went and got the prereqs for medicine. And then he went and started to pursue like his life to be a medical doctor. And so ended up getting into the University of Utah, which is like the whole story there is another crazy story of faith and fortune of knowing the right people. My dad, I'm going to butcher the stories, but my dad has stories of just certain people at the right time in the right places, making sure that his journey was there. But, you know, he got his MD at the University of Utah. When he graduated, he was the first full Tongan, to get their MD in psychiatry at a university in America.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And when he did it, it's funny because from the time my dad went to college, went back to school to be able to get his medical degree, he had the 3 that I'd mentioned, me, my sister, and my brother. Mm-hmm. And by the time he finished his residency, his medical school residency, all that, there was 5 more. So there was 8 total. So you can imagine the type of journey when you have 5 kids along this journey of school at which you're a broke student.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's not just an undergrad, this is medical school, you know? And so that was my life. And so in that timeline, when my dad finished residency and became a full licensed physician, could start practicing, that was the year I left on my mission. And so my whole life,
your childhood was
just the hustle. Yeah, the hustle. And obviously you look back now and I didn't really recognize it or realize it, it's only until you get older that you really start to like appreciate your parents' journey and realize like, holy cow, we were poor. Like we were more than poor. We were like negative poor, you know? But I'm thankful because it taught me a lot of lessons in those principles that served me really well. But yeah, so my dad graduated medical school, became a licensed physician. He is I'd say he's, you know, a staple in the community just because of what he's been able to accomplish. And principally, right, he was able to teach me the things that his father taught him, which is, I just need you to be better than me. I need you to remember your roots, right? And so those are the 2 things that me and my journey have I've focused on. And so when I got home from my LDS mission, I served my mission.
Where at?
Ghana, West Africa.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh man, yeah. So that was that. I loved it, man. That was like an OG mission. Like that's like a physically demanding mission.
Oh, I'm sure, dude. How hot did it get?
Super hot. I mean, and it's humid and you don't have AC. And so it's like, yeah, it's mega hot. And so, but you're on the coast, luckily. But I loved everything about it. Like, honestly, it taught me a lot about myself. It teaches you a lot about like the American dream, in the sense of just seeing what it is outside of America. And, it's funny because you take religion out of it, which, you know, you really can't, because religion to me is like, it's what makes this world tick. Yeah. But if you just looked at a mission objectively, especially that one, it teaches you so much about the abundance mentality and gratitude and humility. Because those people are like, they're living dirt floors, like wood walls, you know, or mud walls, right? Yeah. And like, they're the happiest people on earth, dude.
For sure.
It's like, it's crazy. Like their contentment and where they find their happiness is so different than America. And so me being able to see that helped a lot. And I look back on those years, and again, like it's always easy to look in hindsight and put like the dots together. But like, I just look at like everything from like how I grew up, seeing my dad like through the struggle, seeing my parents barely make it through, and always sharing a room with my siblings. Like I see all of that story leading up to my mission, to then being thrown into a third world country. Like there's so much mindset that's being built there. Yeah. And at the time I didn't know what it was, you know, I just was like, oh, I'm just going to do this. And luckily I can say I've always been blessed with like a non-victim mentality. Like I've never felt sorry for myself. In fact, most of my life, I didn't even know we were poor. Like I didn't really understand. I was just like, this is life. Life is what it is, you know? But that served me really well because like I look back now and I'm thankful because these circumstances like created a lot of really grit and a lot of capacity that I didn't know would be extremely valuable in entrepreneurship later. Right. To where, you know, that I attribute a lot of my experiences from the ages of 18 down to like just developing like a capacity to do hard things that's greater than most people just because of how I grew up.
For sure.
You know? And so
when I look at that, I always think, how did I, like in my journey, high school, I'm living like a high schooler, hanging out with my buddies. I'm not thinking about making money. My work ethic is all related to sports, right? And it's like, I don't understand the concept of what it means to provide for myself or a family, right?
Yep.
And so I look back and I served an LDS mission, complete different mission, Indianapolis, right?
Let's go. Colts, baby.
100%. Like, they weren't building houses out of mud out there. But I mean, when I look back on my career and where I developed discipline to create something, that was my mission through and through. Like, that's the one word I would tie to my mission is discipline. And waking up 6:30 every morning, 6, whatever it was, and you have a set routine and you set your day up for success, right? From the beginning, you're planning, you're doing all these life skills that I had no idea about. And to this day, that planning, that goal setting, a structured routine, like that's how I thrive. If I don't do that, my mental health starts going down.
100%.
I don't have the motivation to keep going.
Yep.
So for me, the mission was like nuclear into what I've built. But you had a different story where you had your family story. Would you combine the two, or how would you decipher what helps Lame tick?
Yeah.
What creates the monster of Lame? Is it more your upbringing? Is it more like the mission that created who you are?
Yeah, it's that's a really good question. Like a very like interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked. When I look back on it, I am thankful to have experienced a life and experiences that when I finally stepped into this third world country experience, I had developed a capacity to where I can honestly say when I got on my mission, it was like maybe a month into it, I was like, okay, I'm good. Like I wasn't like, I didn't want to go home. I wasn't homesick. I wasn't like it really didn't take me long to adjust. And I think a lot of that was just because how I was brought up. Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks to a principle of like, you know, your capacity to do hard things is directly related to your experience of doing hard things, right? Sure. And luckily, I was brought up in a way that I don't think my parents intentionally meant for my life to be as hard as it was. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, I don't think it was hard. And I just think it was life at the time. But circumstantially, it's definitely a lot harder than my kid's life.
Yeah, like, you didn't need a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I do think like it's a combination of really embracing those things and understanding them, because I will say I think there's a lot of people that would look at the circumstances that I was brought up in, and there's a lot of people that served my same mission and they just didn't get the same experience from it. Whether it's like, you know, I have a lot of people that I grew up with that, you know, they almost like despised their, you know, upbringing. They felt it was damaging, this, that, the other. And on the other side of that, I got a lot of people that constantly left early on their mission to Ghana, right? Because it was very difficult. And so I think a lot of it comes down to your perspective of how you're going to allow certain things to either benefit or limit your life, right? There was a saying on the mission, I think this actually applies to everything, right? My mission president always used to say, don't just go through mission, let the mission go through you. And like, that is to say that like, embrace it for what it is, right? Come what may and learn from it, right? And I think that's something that I thankfully, for whatever reason, I can't say that it was something I was taught. It was just inherent. I've always just been like, cool, we're going to make the best of this. We're going to learn from it, and we're going to come out better on the other side, right? And I think that's been something that served me well, even into entrepreneurship, to where it's like, because entrepreneurship, that's all it is.
Yeah.
You're just dealt crappy hands every day. Like, you just have to figure out how to play and how to win, you know? And so like, that's something that served me really well early on, is I felt like I've always been good with the struggle, and I've always embraced it for what it is and met it where it's at. And you always learn the best from that, you know?
Yeah. Dude, I have this theory, and this is the only generation I grew up in. So it's like, this is just my best guess, but I feel like our generation, the people that were around today, are so like, we use the word soft, and like, whether that's PC or not, I'm going to use it. Like my full belief is that if you can figure out what's in between your 2 ears, if you can have that bandwidth to figure out your brain and not have a victim mentality, and to roll with the punches, and to have that positive outlook, you can outpace every single person around you.
100%.
Like, as an entrepreneur, and that's where I say, like, I feel like I've honestly been a natural, like, happy person, natural, like, positive thinker. And so, like, luckily I didn't have to work for it too hard. But like, I don't know how true that is. Maybe the other generations were soft too, but I
think it's absolutely truth. I think it's an eternal truth. Like, I mean, and really, because what you're describing, I think, is ultimately, like, at its core, it's just self-development, right? It's getting better. And it's funny, I think it's easy to see when you look at old versions of yourself even, right? I remember when I was of the mindset of like, if I make 6 figures this year, like, I will be set. Like, I'm going to be better than I ever was, this, that, the other. And you get there and you realize that there's always more. But then it's funny, because then I made my first $1 million. And when I made my first $1 million, I just remember thinking back on when I made my first 100 grand. And like, it's crazy to look at yourself then and now and realize that there is a future state of you that is looking back at you today in the same way that you're looking back at yourself years ago, right? Wow. Yeah. And it's like, and to your point, it's like, it's only when you allow yourself to really become that person is really when you allow yourself to see the opportunities and they come to you. And it's crazy because, like, and I'm sure you feel this way, right? If I started from zero today, I could rebuild it all. Like, I'm a different man than I was 10 years ago. And I just know how to make $1 million if I needed to, you know, from scratch. And there's no real difference. I can't say that I have a uniquely different skill set or talent that I did when I was making 6 figures in door to door. I really can't. The only difference is like my ability to think through problems and like what I tell myself. Yeah. Those are the only two. That's it. That's literally the only two difference. Like, I can't say that I've gotten this much better at sales or like this much better at relationships. Like, it's not true. Like, I'm like, maybe a little, but more than anything, like what I tell myself and how I solve problems, those two have become extremely like far and beyond. So which proves the point, money is a mindset game. Yeah, 100%. It is a mindset game. The moment you can start thinking it, believing it, seeing it in here is the moment you realize it, right? And that's I've been in entrepreneurship for like 6-7 years now in some capacity or the other. And at the very beginning, it was always, what am I missing? Like, what nugget of information, of knowledge am I missing to where I'm not making this much? What piece of knowledge? And I was always seeking that. Like, where is it? Yeah. And I've realized more and more, especially as I get in rooms with people that are doing millions. It is almost, there isn't a single nugget that will ever get you to that point. It's always the mind. It is always your belief in what you can get. And it's easier said than done, of course. Like, but I made a post this morning. You have to have the passion towards something too, or else you're just going to get beaten up. Like the first time I went full time in real estate, I was 40 grand in debt, throwing money at marketing, trying to figure it out. I had zero self-belief. I was in a freaking rut. Right. And looking back at that,
I've had much bigger L's than 40 grand. So it's crazy to
creative finance.
Yeah, exactly, dude. It's wild to think where my mind and where I thought my life was at that moment of 40 grand in debt, and thinking I'm never going to come out of this. And to where my mindset is now, if I lost 50 grand tomorrow, it would suck, but
we'll get over
life.
Yeah.
You got two choices. You're going to sink. You're going to have a negative mentality, and that's going to ruin your active income. It's going to ruin your family life. It's going to ruin a lot of different aspects. Or you get over it, you go make more money, and you learn from it, right?
100%.
So and it's funny that you say that.
And like tying this all into family, right? Like, as we've talked and discussed about how important mindset is, that is why your inner circle is vitally important, right? Specifically your friends and people around you, your spouse, right? The relationships that you choose to be in, the rooms that you choose to be in, like mindset's everything. And if you can only but accelerate this, it accelerates your success. And that's why like really being around the right people and having the right voices in your head is important, because it's either going to sink or swim you. It really is. And that's why, like, naturally, sadly, every time I get to a new layer of life, I feel like my friend and my inner circle just evolve. It changes, right? And it's just like, and it's because there's this like effect of mindset where you're naturally drawn to the people that are on the same wavelength as you, because then you all start speaking the same language, and then you're just drawn to that, right? And naturally, when you take steps and leaps and bounds of mindset, if people aren't on that same wavelength, it's hard to be with them, right?
It's cutthroat, but it's so true. It's man. Like, it's natural evolution. It's what I realized in that same capacity. I mean, we talked about this the other day too. It's, you don't think like, oh, I need to cut this person from my life, like after I come from a seminar. That's not what it is. It's like, I no longer feel comfortable around this person, and you want more of what makes you feel, and comfortable is probably the wrong word, but motivated. And that positivity around you that
100%.
That you feed into as an entrepreneur. And if you're around the negative energy, if you're around the energy that doesn't keep your wheels turning, even if it's a social wheels turning, it's so devastating
100%
to the mental game. It's like,
and that's why, like, I think your greatest business decision that you can ever make is your spouse. Like, I think that is key, because that, I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I see their wives hold them back. And it's because of this idea, right? Like that they just are like, their spouse can't elevate with them. They can't think bigger, right? There's too much risk mitigation. How many guys that, it's like, you might go do something like, oh, my wife would never. And it's like, that shouldn't be a thing. Like, go talk to your wife. I'm not telling you to like, make decisions. I'm telling you, like, if you both understand what this, like what this is and where you're going, like, you should be able to have a dialogue about it and then make a decision together, but
if the husband isn't confident in it, there's no reason for the wife to feel that confidence either.
100%. That's a very good point. That's a really good point.
Because that's what I see a lot of. Of course, you're like, if you're talking about it skittish, your wife's going to be like,
exactly. That's a really good point. And so it is really, it's the perfect union.
Exactly.
Right? Your marriage has to be dialed. And I think, and I think it looks different for everybody, right? Because me and my wife has no idea how much money we make, nor does she care. Like, she really doesn't care. As long as like we just have the basics, she's fine. Right. But she understands my motivation and my drive. And because of that, we've just essentially set very specific roles in our marriage that are very traditional to where it aligns with, our union, to where honestly, she deserves just as much of all that we've built because of her role, even though she's not indirectly in it. She couldn't tell you what a mortgage is. Like, she couldn't tell you anything about real estate.
That's my wife.
But like, we rule this kingdom together, you know,
sure.
and like she's done just as much and is a part of it just as much as I am because of the role in which she's been able to buy in at, which is home, right? I know my kids are taken care of. My kids are homeschooled. I don't do anything around the house. You know, huge. I know that, you know, she said that some of her friends have opinions about me because we just have an agreement. Like I don't change diapers. I do, but like not many, you know, I don't really clean because she cleans. Right. And like, it is what it is. But again, like for us, it works and we're unified in that. Because she swipes a card and she never knows what the balance is. You know what I mean? Like she has no concept. And so I only share that to really make the point of like, you know, it really is a perfect union, but that perfect union takes work and effort together to talk and discuss and to figure out what that is
for sure, to
be able to make sure you're all going in the right direction. Right.
And I want to dive into that more. But I want to say one thing about my wife. We're similar. I'm maybe more of like I change diapers. I do a lot of the.
Let's go.
And that's because it works for our where my role stands is very much so more like she does the cleaning. I have some chores around the house, but it's very like she stays at home with her little baby, and she knows she's taken care of, and that stability means the world to her. And so there's no fighting about it. But I'll say one thing is when I had the biggest L of my career, which you know about, I lost 180 grand on a deal that went sideways, and it devastated me to like the core. But it was like for 2 weeks, and in the investment world, you kind of learn to roll with the punches, and that was a big punch. Like I was down for 6. But, I got up and really like the trigger that was like, no, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to come out better. Like I'm ready to take on the world, is when my wife and I talked about it. And this was after a few days. And she's like, I trust you. I'm not worried. Like go figure it out.
Yeah.
And that was like all I needed. So it is very much side of, I am figuring out how to bring stability in like the financial world to my family, but without her support, there's no possible way I would have the same confidence.
100%. And that's why it's like, it really is such a perfect union. And if you can figure it out and if you can work together to do it. And again, it comes back to, you know, who are you surrounding yourself with? How are they affecting your mental psyche? And that's everything. Because again, and I say this all the time, but money is a mindset game. It really is.
So how'd you meet wifey?
So I grew up in Bakersfield, California.
Wait, so you went from Idaho to California?
Yep.
To Utah. Okay.
We kind of were all over. So during my dad's school and tenure, like he was all over for rotations. So like in that time of like my childhood, I actually was homeschooled, AKA I laid cement. I buried cables. I worked, right? Like I have no record of like formal education between 1st and 8th grade. So like when I actually went into high school, they put me in remedial classes.
Really?
Because I had no I just had no like I didn't have any like record, like, cause I really didn't do any school. And so, and I'll come back around to that. But yeah, we kind of were bouncing around, and that's why it made the most sense for my parents just to have us homeschooled, so we weren't like jumping school to school to school to school. And so when we finally landed in Bakersfield, it's because my dad had graduated residency, or he had graduated medical school, and his residency was in Bakersfield. Okay. And Bakersfield was the last place on his list of residencies that accepted him, and so it was like a big deal.
Wait, why did he take it if it was his last?
So when you graduate medical school, you essentially have to apply for a residency program, and you essentially will apply based on a set list of residency programs, and you rank them in order of like your first preference all the way to your last. And I don't know the details of it, but you're only limited to like a certain amount. And so my dad, originally we had Sioux Falls. I know that was one he really wanted to go to. There was a second one that was, I can't remember. I think it was in Texas, or I can't remember, but his last one was Bakersfield, California.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's why we went. So we went to Bakersfield, California. I got enrolled into high school because I had no record of school. They threw me in remedial classes, right? And basically that's like, I like some of them are in the special ed program, right? And so it's like the lowest of low. According to education standards, right? By my sophomore year, I was in all AP classes, right? And that right there is my story and proof as to why the public school is like, it's failing us. Yeah. It's absolutely failing us. Because then I graduated high school, like I think my whole high school career, I think I got like maybe a handful I can count on my hands, B's. Like really? I aced everything. And frankly, I didn't try. Like I didn't have to. And, but I went into high school, played football there, and that's kind of how it all started. But I look back looking at like my education even, and I'm thankful that I didn't go to school simply because of like the perspective it gave me about life, which really wasn't the box that's created for you and what you're held to in the public school systems. And that was crucial. That was very crucial now that I look back on it. Just not being able to learn in a box. Because then when I went into school, like my study habits, everything like that, it just was different. And I think it was just because instead of me learning how to study by way of the public school system, I actually just looked at it as a problem, and I uniquely problem solved it to where like, and this is what they won't teach you in school. If you just listen enough in class and you understand who your teacher is, they tell you all the answers and they tell you exactly what to study. Even if they give you an assignment and they say, do this and this, if you listened hard enough, they will tell you what to study. You don't have to actually read everything they tell you. Like you can just pick it apart. And that was like something that I never clicked with my classmates. Cause I'm like, everyone's like, oh, you got a perfect score. Like how much you study? I was like, I didn't study. Like I just like read very specific parts while I'm in class, just double tasking. They're telling us the answers. Yeah. You know what I mean? And like, but I realized it was just, they didn't understand how to problem solve. They didn't understand their framework of how to approach problems and how to learn, frankly, was instilled to them because of how public school is. And they teach it to you from a very young age, which is you do this, and it's all memorization. It's all rote. It's all like, just like a task as opposed to like, here's a problem. Here's the objective. What is the best and quickest way to get there? And in the classroom setting, you just got to know who your teacher is and you got to listen to them. Like you do those two things, they give you everything.
I'll even say too, how your parents raised you. Like luckily my parents were definitely the go figure it out type. But I mean, we had four kids, right? They didn't have a lot of time to sit us down and break things down. We had to figure things out on our own. And so that, massive. So how'd you meet wifey? You're in Bakersfield?
Yep. So in Bakersfield, and then I get called on my LDS mission. And then in the middle of my mission, my family moved to Elkridge, Utah. Cool. And so when I got home, there was this very attractive girl next door. And so I met my wife because when I got home from a mission, she was my next door neighbor. Really? And so, and so the name of my company is Elkridge Management. Exactly. And the logo is 2 next doors. And it's because that's how I met my wife. I met my wife in Elkridge, Utah, and she was my next door neighbor. And so
that's like wild.
That's the origin of the company name. So
when you got married to the wife, were you in door-to-door this time?
Yes. So I started door-to-door when I married her. So I was working at Vivint while I was dating her in the call center. And then when I got married, my dad basically told me it was the best thing he could have ever done for me. He was like, hey, you're on your own. Like once you get married, like you got to worry about your own finances, insurance, all that. And so and when I married her, I had like $300 in the bank account, and so naturally the best option was, well, I'm going to go on this summer journey that, I'm being pitched to by this guy, and he's, saying that he has a house for me and a job. So I was like, all right, let's go do that. And so I went out there, and that was the start of a, lucrative 7-year career, 6-7 years at Vivint. And I'm super thankful because obviously you learn a lot of foundational principles while you're on that journey, right? But that's where door-to-door started, was me getting married and feeling like my back was against the wall because this is all I had to do. And so I jumped into door-to-door. So.
Yeah, I always say, like, when I think about where my career started, it's the day I got married.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is when my career started. Because when you just have to worry about yourself, like there's not
pretty easy. Yeah, exactly. Like I love top ramen. Like
you don't have to think hard at all. But when I got married to my wife, that's when everything shifted. And then obviously now 3 months into my first kid, that's when it really picks up.
Changes again. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. But okay. So one question that I love asking the door-to-door industry is someone, probably one of the only people in Utah that hasn't ever stepped foot into that world. I definitely have a ton of respect for it though. As someone in door to door being married, my assumption is that family life can be tough when you are knocking the doors, bringing your wife out. Talk to me about how you attempted to balance family life and the industry of door to door.
Yeah. Dude, even this question alone is making me realize like certain perspectives that I look back now as I look at my wife and think about how we started, because, the first balance that you have to figure out and create is when you're in door to door and when you're married is like, my wife was by herself, in this apartment in the middle of Texas where she knows no one.
Let's pause too, because a lot of people don't understand what summer sales is. You're moving to every summer a random place that's not close to home. And typically bringing your wife, right?
100%.
In a hotel room. So I'll preface that and then keep going.
And so we just moved out. This was in Texas, Humboldt, Texas. And we were just out in these little dinky apartments. I didn't know anybody on the team, by the way. So I had one friend that had invited me, Jake Durfee. He had invited me to it. His brother was running the team. But even then, he wasn't out there like when I got out there because he just got married. And I'd never met his wife, and my wife didn't know his wife. I only knew him. He wasn't there. And like we were just out there on this team and nobody knew anybody, right? And so like I remember the very first day, like I get home and I sit down, I'm like, hey, how was it? And my wife just starts bawling. She just starts sobbing. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? She was like, I just felt really lonely, and she was out here in this apartment just by herself, doesn't know anybody. And like, we didn't have any furniture, right? And when we got there, the furniture that was supposed to be there, because they give you furnished housing, and it wasn't ready. And so like when we were out there, it was literally just an empty apartment, right? And I'm working all day. And so I get home and like she's just by herself. And it's funny because I just look back at that now and I look at the journey even my wife is now. It's like I could call her right now and be like, hey, I got to go to Georgia and I'm going to be there for a week. And she'd be like, okay, like, see ya, And it's just funny because to your point, it takes a lot of work to like get aligned on the ship, right? And honestly, I couldn't even tell you what the conversations were, but I just look back on that experience and I look at it now and it's like, man, look how far we've come, right? And it's just a lot of like one-on-one coaching. It's a lot of individual, like just the two of us in our perfect union talking through this. It's like, hey, how do you, we're going to be out here for the next few months. Like, how do we make this work? You obviously have a problem and not quitting, right? I know a lot of guys, because like that day also sucked. Like that was the worst day ever. It's like, this job sucks. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's not like we both came home and we're like, we love this. Like, let's figure it out. It's like, hey, we committed to this. This sucks. But I promise you, if we can just get through it, we'll be better for it. And there's going to be a lot that comes from it. And it's funny because I look back years now and I would have never known what I was giving up if I had quit. I would have never known, like at all. And I'm so thankful I didn't, right? Because it's through hard things is really not where you get to where you are, but it's where you become what you're supposed to be. And then you get to where you are.
I love it. And one thing that I'll like hone in on that you said is really comes down to communication.
Yep.
And for me, I won't pretend like we have like this picture perfect marriage. Like every marriage has things to work on, right? But the biggest lesson that I learned at the beginning of marriage, and the beginning as in like the first 2-3 years that it took me to figure this out, is marriage is an active approach. It will always be. And that communication aspect was massive. So, and it's easier said than done, especially
100%.
when you go from just worrying about yourself just taking care of yourself, fixing up ramen, doing what you got to do. That's easy, right? And people always say, like, why do people say that marriage is such a change? Like, we're dating, we see each other every single day, but it's a different perspective when you're saying, I will live with this person forever. Like, this is my person, this is my rock forever. And that's a strong statement.
Yeah.
Communication is. So.
And just to add to that, right? Like, cause now, this is a principle that has been repeatable in life when it comes to relationships. I think the easiest way to explain it is like in the context of business. People like Josie, for example, right? She is like my right hand in my business. She's somebody that started out as a cleaner. And I have a community now where I teach people how to scale their short-term rental businesses. Oftentimes I'll have her come on and like basically talk about her role, and people will interview her, what she does as they're trying to look for their Josie, right? Yeah. And the number one thing that they always tell me is like, man, like, how'd you find her? How'd you get Josie? Like, where'd you find her? And like, I always say this, like, because it's the truth, like in any market, like A players, they're not found, they're developed. Mm-hmm. And you apply that to life. A good marriage is never just found. Like, you don't just find your soulmate. I don't really believe in that.
Yeah.
It's created in the journey, right? In every relationship. And it takes time, it takes patience, but like that is the secret behind these perfect marriages, behind these A players, behind anything that's anything of substance, is it takes time and it takes commitment, and it's never just found or realized. It's always developed, you know?
And I like what you said too, because there's a lot of people that make the assumption that, oh, my marriage sucks right now. And if my wife, if my spouse, if whatever role this is, if they only
did this.
Yeah. If they only did this. If they only had this trait, this, that. And that's where I feel like it gets dangerous.
100%.
That's why I always try. Like, and again, I don't want to sit here and act like I'm a counselor, but the active approach, that's what clicked in my head, is like, if I'm not working to serve my wife, if I'm not looking to make her feel special, like, it is an active approach. And as soon as you let go on the gas, like, why do you expect her to feel the same?
100%.
So
100%.
Anyways, so you jump into summer sales with wife.
Yep.
Obviously you had an excellent career in those, making multiple six figures and door to door. Tell us about your journey of maybe it's time to switch into real estate. Like, how did that go about?
Yeah. And it was something that kind of just fell into my lap, honestly. Like, I think people always ask me, like, have you known you want to do real estate? I didn't at all. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it was just an industry that was in front of me at the time. Because I got to a point with Vivint where, like, a lot of people, I think everybody gets to this point at some point in their life where they're just like, there has to be more.
Yeah.
Like, this couldn't be it. This isn't where I'm like, parking my ship, right? And that's what it was for me. And what a lot of people don't know is when I started Elkridge, I started 3 different companies. And I was just like trying to figure out what worked. I started an Airbnb company because I had an Airbnb, and I was like, hey, at least I've been doing this for a year. I probably could manage other people's. Had an Airbnb company. I started a government contracts company for group homes. And then I started a Pokemon card.
Really?
Like, yeah. I was like slinging cards, like flipping Pokemon cards and stuff. And this is, this is like during the boom, right? During like 2020, 2019 of Pokemon cards. And so I did those 3. And honestly, like, my time and attention just went to what was, making us money at the time. And it was Airbnbs. And luckily I was good at sales. I had like a decent track record. So I developed these, soft skills of communication, negotiation, persuasion, leading teams. And so I decided to jump into Airbnb because I started making money off of an arbitrage, which an arbitrage is a rent to rent. Uh-huh. Like, I went and found a landlord, convinced him to let me rent it, and I furnished it with my own money. And then anything above cost of rent and utilities, I made, right? And really that was the start of it. And then I made money there, doubled down, got a few more arbitrages, got some co-hosts, and that was the start of the journey.
Was this in between summers, or were you like, I'm done with summer sales, this is it, let's get it?
This was me going cold turkey, brother. And like, and like, I look back now, and financially it was not a smart decision. It wasn't at all. But I tell people this all the time. Like, you really don't know what you're made of until you really put your feet against the fire. And you almost limit yourself. You limit your capacity to perform because you just aren't, like, you're just not willing to, like, go there. Mm-hmm. And, like, I tell people that all the time. It's like, look, the best thing you can do for yourself is put yourself in a position to win. And I promise you, you'll find a lot more about yourself than you realize, right? And that's been a lot of the journey now, is like just taking risks, because, you know, you got to find now those positions to put yourself in to be able to take the next step. So, yeah.
One of my favorite analogies is when you are 80 years old, and I've probably said this before, so apologies to any listeners that I repeated this, but when you're 80 years old, what are you going to regret? Is it the lack of doing it or taking the safe route? Even if you fell flat on your face, that 80-year-old is always going to say, I'm glad I tried.
Yeah.
And so there's probably a better way to 100%. Explain this with some more real life story. But that's what I've been trying to replay in my head, that you, Lame, have done like a freaking good job of, is just like, all right, I'm going to do this. Let's get it.
Yeah.
And that's easier said than done by, like, even for myself, it's where's the next step? Do I want to do this? Am I going to regret it? What about my family? What about vacations? I mean, we've talked about this, right?
And to that point, right? Like, one thing that's crucial to be mentioned in this is your family, right? Mm-hmm. My wife, luckily, is somebody that, like, if we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with all 4 of my kids and we had enough just to pay rent and food on the table, my wife would still be with me. Mm-hmm. Like, she would still love me. Like, she is committed to this relationship as much as I am to her. And, like, we'd find happiness. Like, we could be happy in that circumstance, right? Because I've done it before, right? I've had nothing and still been happy. Like, money does not determine my happiness. When you can really honestly get into that space and be okay with that described scenario, risk looks a lot different. Mm-hmm. Like, what you choose to risk looks a lot different when you can tell yourself, if I lost it all, I'd still be happy. Like, I'd be okay. I wouldn't be content, but I'd be okay. And then suddenly your risk assessment now changes drastically. And then you can place yourself in that mind space of putting your back against the wall, because you have, in that framework, nothing to lose, because you have everything within your family and your love at home, right? And that's why your family's really important in this. So one last question for you. Well, actually, let's make this a 2-part question. The first aspect to it is entrepreneurship is a roller coaster. Yep. There's fires very frequently, some bigger than the other. When fires come up in your business, how are you, like, what tactics are you using to separate that from taking your stress and you being overwhelmed to home? That's a really good question. You know, one of the things that we did strategically, and this was very intentional from the beginning, is to not have my wife involved in the business. And she isn't. She is in a very important way, which is she just supports me at home. She takes care of the home front. But in terms of the day-to-day, she has no idea. Like, she couldn't, if I died today, like, she'd have no idea what to do. Like, I mean, I have stuff in place, like, but I mean, she herself would not know what to do with the business, right? You call Josie. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what you do. But, you know, like, that has proven to be a boundary that has been extremely useful. The reason being, because when I get home, I can't talk about work. Mm-hmm. When I'm home, right? And, like, there's not a thing of, you know, a problem that we have to worry about. And that helps a lot when you're in the pressure of the fire, you know? And my wife can feel it. Like, she knows. She's like she's so intuitive now to where she knows when something happens, but it allows me to be able to have a space where, like, we can't talk about it. And so let's worry about being home and be more present. But she also is, you know, keen enough to know, like, hey, do you got to go to work? Like, I know it's, you know, 8:00 and we're about to watch, you know, our daughter's game, but, like, if you need to go, I got it. Right. And so having that boundary has helped a ton, like, when it comes to fires and stuff, like, just being able to find your space, you know? So it's even less about how you're reacting, more so the circumstance. You can be in your own
world and you know that home's figured out.
100%. And like when you go home, like it's a recharge, right?
Yeah.
Because like your greatest asset in business is your mental state.
Yeah.
It's your greatest asset.
Yeah.
Like the worst thing you can do is freak out.
Yep.
That is the absolute worst thing you can do and stress the F out.
Yep.
And so sometimes the best thing is just to chill.
Yeah.
And just to like reset and just recover, because the solutions come at its best when you are in a great state of mind.
For sure. I feel like right now where I'm at with a 3-month-old, I feel like I'm in like the honeymoon phase of kids. And when I have a stressful day at work, like luckily because I'm in this honeymoon phase, I come home, I see my baby smile.
Just recharge.
Everything's gone.
Yeah.
Everything's like, I don't care about like, that is my world. Right. Yeah. And so I know when I have screaming toddlers and they're throwing food at me, it'll probably change. But my last question for you, Lame, how, when you look at your success that you currently have in your family, what's been the biggest connection with those two?
Yeah.
Like, and I know it's easier to say like, yeah, they motivate me, I go out and do it. But what are some real life, like in the weeds of how your family makes Lame who he is right now in business specifically?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about that is really like my culture and community. Mm-hmm. Like there has been some very inherent things that I was brought up in, like being Tongan, that has served me extremely well in business. And I kind of think of them in the same way. One of those just being the concept of money. Like Polynesians, there's a running joke that Polynesians don't have any money because they always give it away. And like, that's the truth.
Best people
like,
ever.
Yeah, it is the truth, right? Yeah. The abundance mentality was taught to me very early through generosity and serving other people. And like, that's been a huge aspect of like my business and journey, both on the risk assessment side, but then also the law of reciprocity, right? Of like giving and getting more in abundance back. That's been like my mantra, right? And that's served me really well to where in business, you know, it's just been something that has been a part of me since I can remember, to where I don't value big dollars. I don't value money. It's just a tool to me, and it's helped me build what I've built because of, you know, that mentality from the very beginning. But yeah, I've been lucky to have that, because I do know that there's people that come from different cultures and backgrounds, and because of what they learn, it almost hinders their ability to scale and grow, because they're so scarce about money. Like they are so scared to lose it. Mm-hmm. They're so scared to have it, and therefore they're very protective and envious of it. And you know, if you read enough books about billionaires, millionaires, a common principle that they will always say is the trait of success and like excessive money is service, is giving. Literally giving it away. Like that is a common trait. And it's not just because it's some theory or some like, you know, some like just fun thing to say in a book. It's the truth. It's like for you to have an abundance mentality to make money, you have to treat it as a tool. And therefore you when you do and understand it, you're giving it away a lot more. So
that's beautiful, dude.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you coming out more than you know. One of my good buddies. I appreciate you more than you know, dude. One of my first OG mentors, definitely in a way, here in Utah specifically. So appreciate you, boss.
Hey, thanks for having me, brother. It's been fun.
Thanks, dude.